Many thanks to the Data Diva Talks Privacy Podcast sponsor and privacy visionary, Smartbox AI, for sponsoring this episode and also supporting our podcast. Smartbox AI, named British AI Company of the Year, provides cutting edge AI helping privacy and technology experts uniquely master their data request challenges and make it easier to comply with global data protection requirements, FOIA requests, and various U.S. state privacy regulations. Their technology is a game changer for anyone needing to sift through complex data, find data, redact sensitive information. With clients across North America and Europe, and a major partnership with Xerox, Smartbox AI is bringing their data expertise right to your doorstep, offering insights into navigating the complex world of global data laws. And for information about Smartbox AI, visit their website at www.smartbox.ai. Enjoy the show. The personal views expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy Podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information the businesses need to know. Now, I have a very special guest on the show, all the way from Spain, Alvaro De Nicholas. He is the CEO of DNA Ventures. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being on the show. We had a very interesting crossing of paths. I was in Spain, in A Coruña, Spain. I was invited to speak at a conference called Ecosystem 2030. And Omar, who's the head of artificial intelligence at NASA, invited me to be there. And I didn't really realize until just now that you and Omar work together at NASA. But before we get into all that, and so you and I, we were at this conference. The conference was phenomenal because they had leaders from different industries all over the world. And so it's very different. I think sometimes you go to conferences and like everyone's like in the same industry and people are talking about the same things. And this is like the opposite of that. And it was so mind blowing and beneficial to cross paths with so many different people. So we didn't get a chance to really connect as much in the conference, but we did connect afterwards. So I would love for you to tell your technology journey and your story. To me, it's fascinating the things you've been working on.
So I thank you very much. Ecosystems is very different because you get to meet very high quality people and very high level, very high positions in government, in administration, in institutions, and in industry. I mean, last year when you were there, it was all female cast, but I was who is who of any industry that you could think of. It was kind of a privilege to be there. And then you spend 2 or 3 days together for the meals as well. So you have a lot of chance to interact and exchange ideas, which is what makes it fantastic, I think, for the speakers and also for the audience that attend. So I started, I come from a small city in the middle of Spain called Valladolid. It's about 500,000 people. I studied telecommunications engineering there. And then when I finished, I basically went to the south of France to work for Accenture, at the time an Accenture consulting. And I worked as a management consultant, but not your typical management consultant because it was very technical. Basically, a lot of companies around the world were giving cable services, TV and TV on demand with cable, but it was analog cable. And you could only have so many channels. And basically, one of the partners at Accenture in the south of France, in Nice, told the client that we could move them to digital, although nobody had done it ever in the world. The client said, yes, I was pretty well wireless in the UK. And they said, fantastic, can you please do it for us? And then he hired 10 PhDs. And then he told us, Ali, go and figure out how to do it, which eventually we did. And then we did that for a lot of cable companies around the world, including Comcast in the US and Liberty Media and some of the very big names today. And basically, we were managing all of the adverts that you can see the people from Madison Avenue, the Mad Men, they were coming up with, and then, putting them into the radio, television, advertising hoardings, and then managing or measuring the impact that that had on how many people saw it, because you cannot tell, in terms of sales, but how many people saw it, which is one of the first, I guess, findings that I had with privacy, because it was very private at that time, because it was all just an estimation. And the body that was making those estimates in Spain was funded by the media advertising companies, because of course they had to have some level of credibility. So they said, this body is independent, although we pay for it. It's going to tell us, how many people have watched this advert in television or in radio. We basically did a sample across in that time Spain and France, and out of 10,000 people, we could tell that 20 million people had seen that advert. How? Well, the algorithms were very secret. I was never quite sure that they were not, increasing the numbers. But in any case, nobody knew whether you watched it or you didn't, like we have nowadays. And at that time, there was no behavioral targeting, obviously, because it was impossible to see, who was watching what. But we had a division called Avas Media Digital, which was started to work on digital advertisement, and we started to work with Google at the time and Yahoo, which were small growing infants, but we saw the potential. And the game is always, the advertisers want to pay as little as possible, and get as much money as possible for the spaces, and the ones that are the clients, the big Procter and Gambles or Reckitt Kisser or Coca-Cola, they want to pay the minimum for that level of exposure. And I joined a company that had one of the bases in France. It was an American company called Sea Change, and it was based in Boston, Massachusetts. And they were doing video on demand servers, moving from hardware to software and services. So I was leading the professional services in outside of the US, and created teams in England, France, Italy, Germany, Austria, and the Netherlands. Then that went very well. We started to, monetize those teams. I said, well, go do it the same in Asia. So because we have clients in Singapore Telecom, Malaysia Telecom, Japan. So I was looking, what to do and what could I find that would keep me closer to home. And luckily, a colleague from Accenture, she called me. She was CIO at British Telecom, the telecommunications company in the UK. So she called me to see if I could help with basically a problem that I had with one of the video platforms. Well, I started working on this video platform, but it was 2012, and the Olympics were happening in London. And everybody was working in the Olympics because it was obviously a big event. So I got a call from TUI, a travel tour operator, German tour operator operating all over the world. And basically they had what is called a bed bank. That is a company that when you go to Expedia or Booking and you book a hotel from the 20th to the 30th of August in Hong Kong, then they will go, Expedia and Booking will go to thousands of bed banks who have the contract with the hotels, and whoever responds the fastest with the best price then gets the sale. So that was the operation. But through that small thing, their revenue was around 2 billion. But I brought in some people as well, and we got to start working on moving our platform to cloud in 2016, which was very early for most companies. And it was our core platform, which was doing 10,000 requests per second when I arrived. And then 2 years later, we're doing about 1 million per second. And eventually then when I was completed, then I went on to look for more challenges. And I landed in a company that's like an Airbnb, but managed. And I was there for 2 years because on the personal side, my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer. So I had to come back home and be with her. She's okay now since she got the all clear. I very much enjoy entrepreneurs because I think you guys are the salt of the earth, and nothing happens without the ideas and the strength that you have. When Elon Musk says that having a company is like eating glass and looking at the abyss all the time, it's true. It's a tough job, but I really get a lot of the energy from that. Then I've been lately in the financial industry, which I had tried to avoid all my life because there's a lot to do, a lot of things on the technology side to improve. But there's a lot of money. I still make a lot of money, and not much interest on changing anything because you're regulated as well, and therefore they are always behind the curve. But some people convinced me that we were going to build the bank of the future and change that tone. And I went to Lloyds Bank in the UK, the largest bank in the UK, 35 million accounts. And there I was moving from dealing with mainframes and this type of systems, and trying to move them into Google Cloud and so on. So we did that for 3 years and managed to close a lot of the applications that were on the platform, replace them for modern ones, and some of the oldest, probably the oldest data center in the world, which had like almost 80 years. And we were worried that the pipes were not burst for the water, for the air conditioning. So we managed to close that one, and then the last thing that I've done is with Zurich Insurance. So yet another financial industry. I wanted to go to work in a company that sells a product that everybody wants to buy but nobody wants to use. Like the life insurance. So that's how I ended up in Zurich.
Tell me a little bit about how you met Omar.
So when I was in Telvets in this bed bank in Mallorca, I went to San Francisco for one of the, I think it was the Oracle conference. In one of the lectures, I had this guy next to me that looked pretty bored. And now I was a little bit too. So I thought, why don't we go for a coffee? So we got talking, and it turns out he was the chief innovation officer of NASA, the space administration, and which was very interesting to me because I knew nothing about it. And we got talking about how it was an election year, and the administration was going to change and probably lower the budget. If we know the numbers now with SpaceX and stuff, but at the time it was they were going to cut the budgets, and therefore they had to figure out how they could still continue to operate with less money. And I was asking, well, why is it so expensive? Why is it so difficult to do experiments in space? We have to prepare them 3 years in advance, etc. And I thought, well, I got a friend who was working in one of the oil companies, and they have this very large. They carry the oil from one country to another, and of course, they are mostly automated because they don't want to have crew, so they can take as much space as possible for the crew because it's very expensive to move it around for the oil. And therefore, there's only 1 or 2 people in the boat, and the boat is mostly going on its own. So they could run into some reefs or some whales or something that could damage the hull of the ship. So they had bought these big Predator drones that were used in the wars to go around every single ship and then check that the hull was intact while they were moving from one country to another, which was $1 million or $2 million each one of those Predator drones. They realized at some point that they could do it with smaller drones that had the air propellers, and when the big ship passed near a harbor, they would just go with the drone and around, and then come back to the harbor. And it was like almost 50 times or 100 times cheaper than using the Predator drones. So I said, yeah, but how is that useful for me? I mean, I don't know why you tell me this story, man. And then he called me 1 year later, and he said, we did what we discussed. And how did you? So we took a phone, and then we put some solar panels and give it electricity, and then we told the guys in the space shuttle to just throw them out the window when they were in the space, and then the phone will connect to each other and create a network, and then we can run some experiments. So you can learn from one industry to the other. And they said, so you think that if we can invite people from different places, they would come? And I'm like, you're NASA, you're in Houston, Kennedy Space Center. Who's going to say no? So we started like that. And then we were inviting people that were working at Marvel, Google X, chefs, Lumina. Many people from different trades. Also, some of the people were working at designers, some of the best designers in the world for cars and other things. And it was just incredible. And then we were all talking about how do you innovate? And so I was doing innovation by stealth. So without telling anybody, just try to, within the company, to try to get new things done, like with blockchain and stuff. Other people were doing open innovation. They were working with the masses already to try to get ideas from many people. And out of that evolved. We did that for 4 years. Once a year, we were meeting in Kennedy Space Center for a week or a bit less, and then we'll all be together all the time. Like we're in the same hotel, beers together, and then the camaraderie that you were generating at that time was such that you could then talk to these people forever, and it was very useful as a network, but also as a source of creativity. And then when the pandemic came, we decided to write a book, a manifesto of sorts, where we got all these people that had gone through the program, which was almost 200 at the time. And basically, we wrote that you can find on the web. And we're trying to advise governments and citizens about what to do to come back to normality after COVID. And I really still, from time to time, we were talking about privacy. Actually, one of the things about data privacy and our right to own our own data. So among other things, turning to the ecosystems 2030, there is where we met.
You pose an interesting question, and I think it's fascinating. I want to talk a little bit more about this. The question you posed was, is privacy the privilege of those who can afford it? I want your thoughts on it. And I have my thoughts as well.
I mean, nowadays, we are constantly giving data, and willingly or not. I mean, I think I said one of the posts in LinkedIn that I've rejected so many cookies that the Cookie Monster and Santa Claus reindeer will have trouble trying to eat them all. But still, you're still giving data on with your IoT devices, your phone, your many things that even if you still sign the terms and conditions, you're not, I think, really aware of how much you're giving away. It becomes such that it's personal. So you're giving away who you are as a person, your personality, in which moment you are in your life, which you could be up and down because of circumstances or your family or anything. And they know absolutely everything to the second, on that. And they know because I've been in the industry, and the financial industry needs a lot of data or uses a lot of data to make decisions. And the people that are, very well off, they can afford not to have a phone because they will have a secretary that come and calls them when somebody calls them. So therefore, there's one less problem. They can afford to be isolated in their private network, as it were, all the time, with that reaches to the internet with its own private connections, and therefore there's no way to, access that information. And they're pretty private. I mean, they've always been, but now the difference is even larger. And I'm worried that because we have more and more, now it's AI, before it was machine learning, but algorithms that will make decisions and will help companies make decisions. In the case of banks, for a loan; in the case of insurance, for a life insurance. And the fact that we know a lot about some people and nothing about others, then it means that there's no equality anymore. There's no fairness, which is one of the pillars of democracy, I think. And that's what, one of the things in my head that I wanted to mention here, because I think we're in danger of, just losing that. And training all of the AI models on everything that is available, whether it's copyrighted or not, is also an interesting way to go about it.
I agree with that. I think that what we're creating is like a new digital caste system where people can afford to opt out or not have their data tracked in the same way that other people are. And then also trying to make, broad decisions about people when they, have no agency or no control over the data. And, not all data is correct or not all data is good data, right? So to try to put them into these systems and then uh, assuming that is correct. And then how can a person like someone who isn't wealthy or isn't connected, how can they correct that? Because it may be something like an algorithm used in a school. Maybe they decide that this kid, based on something they had done on their schoolwork, we're going to put them on like a lesser path, right? So maybe they can never get off that path because it's written in an algorithm somewhere or in some data set that they don't know about that's like made a decision, like you'll never be a doctor. So we're going to like make you be this other person. So that's definitely a challenge. And I think it's interesting that you say that because I always thought when in the US, people were like, well, why isn't privacy in like the Constitution? Why is it like a constitutional right? And I I said it's because I thought the founding fathers had like as much privacy as they could possibly want, right? So
Sure.
privacy was not a problem for them, right? But I think for us as regular citizens in the world, as we're seeing more data being pulled in data systems and some people being able to either have more ability to change or even like not even put their data in those systems, I think is a problem.
There's also, like you said, you talked about the wrong data as well. My sister has been working a lot. She works in NGOs, so they've been with Save the Children and the Red Cross and there's quite a few others always in the field. And people against hunger, like something else, I can't remember. But always in the field. And now she's lately working a lot with transgender people, transgender population. And one of the problems that they have is that there's no transgender gender. So they are mostly misrepresented in all of the statistics, and that generates health problems for them because they cannot access the right care at the right time. There's almost 1 million people in the US that are in that situation. And then you have the other side, which is like in El Salvador, they will publish exactly who they are, and then the maras will go after them, and they have to emigrate to Europe or Australia or other places, which is also a problem because there's too much exposure to that data. So it's just and like this, there's many populations in a similar situation.
I want to talk a little bit about IoT, Internet of Things. So this is something that I work on really closely because I felt like this was an area that there's just so, first of all, there's so many innovations that use devices that collect data. And I call IoT devices like a computer without a screen. So people don't really know what these devices are collecting, what they're doing. And it does create, privacy and security challenges because there aren't any good standards right now around how to really wrangle in that data and how to give people transparency. But I want your thoughts on that.
So I think more and more because people are more aware of the privacy or what they're giving away when they're in front of a computer, like you said, or the phone. But then we have a Nura ring or a smartwatch. Then you don't think about it. And these ones are collecting even more data about you because it's not about your senses, your health, your heart rate, your health, which is pretty personal, level of information. And I think there's even more now with mascots and pets. At the moment, in insurance we were given an insurance. I don't know if I should say that, but anyway, we're already there. And we give it insurance to a mascot based on the postcode of the owner and then the age of the animal. Not even what animal, like the age of the animal. So very very little information. So there's a huge margin for improvement there. But also the market for pets is growing exponentially. So it's growing 30% CAGR per year, which is why private equity is getting into it and some other funds and stuff, both in the US and in Europe, obviously. Then a little bit less in Asia and Africa because they have different concerns. But then those pets will have collars that will be given by the insurance industry because they want to track that pet. And then they will tell you have to go to the doctor to prevent, claims later because the animal has got a serious illness or has died. But then the pet doctors take care of the animals. They're not regulated, so they can charge whatever prices they want. The food for the animal is not regulated, so nothing is regulated in the industry. So then you're basically opening the door to a huge amount of money that's going to come in through that. So you think they're doing you a favor, and for the animal maybe they are because they're tracking their health, but it's not for the good of their health.
I want your thoughts about biometrics. So I work in this area as well, not because I love biometrics, but because I'm concerned about how people are using biometrics, right? So, we're seeing a lot more biometrics uses at things like airports and border crossings, which, okay, I can understand that, right? But I think one of the use cases I saw recently in a sports stadium, they want people to use biometrics to like, buy a beer or something. And so I think that's like off the rails. But the benefit and the risks don't seem equal.
My main problem with biometrics is I mean, on one hand, I love it because it's, as a technologist, is very safe and secure. You have many points of comparison. But, if it gets hacked, it's with you forever. You cannot change it like a passport. So, they are immutable. So then what do you do? What's your recourse in that case? And like you say, they are, coming to life in public spaces like airports. And if you mean hacked, somebody stole your biometrics, you can never fly. What's going to happen? And I don't think we've covered all of those eventualities yet.
Exactly. It was very interesting. And also biometrics, I find that's another example of kind of a caste system where, you know, again, a lot of people who can afford not to be in those systems aren't, right? Or they can avoid that type of capture of their data. And so other people can't do that. And that's concerning as well.
The only thing that might be good about it is that if it becomes part of your ID or your passport, then we can train AI models with all of that data so they don't have bias like they do today.
Exactly. I think that the example that I like to use is like, let's say you live in a city and maybe the north side of the city has more traffic cameras than the south side of the city. And so now people on one side of the city get more tickets and stuff. And you can say, oh, these people on this side of the city drive worse. But actually you're not capturing the same data on the other side of the city. So how can you really make that judgment? And so that plays into insurance, that plays into the property values, all those things. And so, if your area isn't tracked as much, you probably have higher property values than the areas that are more tracked.
Do you think that's by design?
Yes, I do.
Fair enough.
What's happening in the world right now in terms of like data, technology, or privacy that's concerning you?
I think it's going to be interesting for us. If I can just, I'm not going to talk about politics. Just in terms of my 2 cents on what I think this affects Europe as you stand here. So I think there's two things that are interesting, or depending on how you look at them, or scary. One is the leaving NATO, leaving the role of the policeman of the world. That for many years the US has done, and trying to keep us properly ruled and stuff, and that if that role is not with the United States, then I don't think China is stepping up to the plate, and Russia is busy with other things. So I think that's gonna lead us to, because of these other things, to the end of globalization, probably. The other things that are also affecting that is, bringing up all of the import taxes into the States. So that would mean that a lot more products from the rest of the world will come to Europe because they don't want to pay those taxes, and they will be flooded with electrical cars, which are probably as good or better than Tesla, but Elon will be okay. But compared to the European car manufacturers, we have a problem, which are also competitors. But so that's a very clever tactic. So for a while, I think prices might get better for consumers in Europe, but eventually, I think everybody will start looking after their own floor and imposing taxes as well to foreign products, which is going to break maybe not the union as such because of the monetary alliance, but everything else will be difficult to get through. So it's funny because I see the US at this point doing a lot like what happened at the beginning of the 20th century, where it was all very closed. And it's interesting how like Ray Dalio says that there are cycles in the economy and the world, and you can see that happening.
So trying to create those barriers, I think is almost impossible to do. I guess you could try to do it, and maybe it'll be hard to do it. But I think just for the flow of currency and for commerce, and especially like the internet and digital things.
If you see the speech of the network, the movie, the network of the microdollars and petrodollars, that's still gonna happen. But then the flow of people, that's going to be a lot more difficult, and merchandising. I was thinking, when GDPR came about in Europe, and I was thinking, I was with the hope really of pushing this as an example to other other countries and really trying to protect the individuals with the huge sanctions of 50% of your revenue. That hasn't quite been like that for anybody, but still, there's been some examples. And then that never happened. That we just got to start with the GDPR and nobody else did anything similar. We're doing the same thing with AI now. With AI, protect the citizen, to protect they're going to, yeah, you go do that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say about that, I think the GDPR has been very influential in the US. And so even though it has not created a lot of laws or regulation at a broad scale about that, but I think the impact that it's had is that it's changed the way businesses think about data. So even companies that aren't in Europe or don't have customers in Europe, if they have any, like, let's say they're a third party to a big company that does that, those companies are really pushing down those business requirements, saying that you have to really align with kind of these data standards. And because the US doesn't really have that on a massive scale, I think the GDPR has been like a good roadmap sort of to think about that. And so I think to me, that's one of the downsides in the US of us not having regulation, where we kind of have to rely on these other frameworks. Even if we aren't passing laws, I think they are having a significant impact on businesses in the way that they operate. So they can't say, well, you have to comply with GDPR. They say, well, here are the kind of the principles, the foundational things that GDPR talks about, and this is the way that we have to manage our business. And as a result, we're going to push those requirements down. And so I think AI will be very similar, where I don't see AI regulation happening in the US like it happened in Europe. But I do see that as being kind of a framework or a guide that companies will definitely look at, because again, to me, this gets back into commerce again. So if you want to do business in Europe, you have to follow those rules. And so are you going to have different rules for different countries? Maybe big companies can do that. Maybe those smaller companies can't do that. And maybe it makes more sense to align with that just as a business.
It's good that you tell me that it has had some level of impact, at least to educate people and businesses. So I think you're right. I think it's going to happen the same with AI. For me, when GDPR came about, I thought this is going to be the moment where we can have CIOs and CTOs in the boardroom, because there's only like 1% in all the companies across the world. Maximum is 1% per country. Because it's like, the CFOs, because at some point the owners of the companies, they saw the financial regulation and said, well, somebody has to go to jail. So you come here and then sit on the board with us. So if something happens, then you can go. So then we would be responsible for the GDPR breaches, because it was such a big financial risk that they would have us on the board. But no, it hasn't really had that effect either.
Right. I wish. So if it were, Alvaro, if it were the world according to you, and we did everything you said, what would be your wish for privacy or technology anywhere in the world, whether that be human behavior, regulation, or something like innovation or in technology?
I mean, for me, would be a kind of a data passport that we would own ourselves, and we could manage explicitly and essentially what data gets used or not. And then we could waive it and say, just take my data away, which now is, like you said in another episode, it's impossible because it's everywhere. But for me, having that right to really own your data, like one more part of your body or your being, existing at the existential level, as Sartre would say. I think that is very important. I mean, it's your medical data, your biometrics, your everything, your digital footprint that you leave everywhere. Be able to monetize it or give it away or whatever it is that you want to do. But then it's a form of trade. So then being able to control it. I don't want to do that. I don't have the answer, but that would be my wish.
I have that wish too, right? That people have agency to be able to control their data almost like a bank, and then they choose how to broker that information. I would love that. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been tremendous. I hope we get a chance to see each other again in Spain. I had a great time there. And so, let's continue the conversation. And I love to find ways we can collaborate in the future.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Debbie.
Yeah.
Take care.
Take care. All right.